Hey everybody, this is Joe. Thank you for watching my Giga Texas construction update video.
Well, welcome back to Giga Texas. It is now the 21st of June 2023, and that means that it's summer solstice, the longest day in the year. And to be honest, it's also one of the hotter days in the year, even this early in the morning. Now, I want to talk about a brief news item you may have heard about, but I'd like to go over here. In the previous few videos, we talked about Ford and then General Motors adopting Tesla's North American charging standard. That would be the plug and also the system that will be installed into the car. And then just yesterday, as you can see here, Rivian decided to join the party. So now we have Rivian, General Motors, Ford, many other car manufacturers are apparently looking into this as well, and a lot of other charging providers are looking at providing that as well. So I think this is a really great sign, and I think maybe kind of the dam is burst and we're going to see a lot more of this. Now, a couple of things that I want to talk about that you'll see in the video today, probably the most important is on the south side of the building. They've already started removing some of the wall panels right over stamping 2. And also, as you can see by this image, the crews are on the roof removing more of the roof liner in the areas where we would expect them to continue to remove some of the wall panels. And this image here gives you a really good overall view of how this is looking right now. Now, you may be wondering, what are they doing or why are they doing this? And I got you covered. If you take a look at this video, my 3 January 2023 video, I kind of covered this in detail and kind of explained what they were doing, what we would be seeing in the coming months, and ultimately what the overall plan may be. So take a look at that video if you want to get a lot more information about what we're seeing today, which is the removal of the wall panels as predicted on the south side of the factory. So pretty neat. Now, a couple other really quick things I want to highlight. You'll see here they're painting on adding the stain on the northwest corner, and they're wrapping around to the north end. Over on the east side, they're now moving another one of those old trees by the old house complex. And I've covered this company, treemover.com, on a previous video as well, so take a look at their web link. And then finally, up at the Megapack system, we see a lot more work with the concrete slabs being installed, some more trenching and more of that steel work on the north end. So I've got a lot more detail in the actual video, so I hope that you watch it all the way through and you'll appreciate the narration in addition to the video. As always, thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it, and I hope you have a great rest of the week. Take care.
A special thank you to all of my outstanding Patreons for your continued encouragement and support. Patreon members get access to hundreds of high-resolution photos, previews of the future material, and direct dialogue with me. If you would like to support my channel, please consider becoming a patron using this link, which is also in the video description. Please also consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons, as this helps as well. Thank you. My drones are ready and raring to go. Let's go flying over Giga Texas. Well, welcome to the summer solstice here at Giga Texas. A lot of activity. We'll start here on the east side. On the bottom in the center of the screen, you can tell the road work, and that intersection continues with some trenching. And this is eventually going to connect over where that new multi-level parking garage will be constructed. Now, one of the things that is very evident here, and it is another major milestone, is on the south end, on that south wall, you can tell that wall panels are being removed. Now, in my 18 June video, I was able to see that they were removing some of the weatherproof membrane on the roof in that section, but I wasn't able to get close. So today I'm going to give you some really close-in views. And as a reminder, I talked about what they're doing on this entire south end where all of the construction is going underway. And that was in my 3 January video, and I would recommend you go back and look at that for a lot more detail. But from this perspective, we can see how much it has changed near the building, all of the work to prepare that surface for that expansion. And then we'll start off on this side of the the site, and then we'll move our way over towards the building. What we see here is work to continue on the River Road extension through this section just south of the Cyber Pond. It looks like they are preparing for the new intersection, which will allow these two new roadways to be operational. And you can see that asphalt is being applied now to at least one half of this, and then they'll probably reconstruct the smaller section that you see on the right hand side of the screen. Now as we continue towards the east, this gives you a good idea of what that intersection that we talked about earlier looks like, and how it will go off into the tree section. And then in those tree areas, that's where we talked about that multi-level parking garage that will be built somewhere in that area. We also see more of the rebar footings have been constructed. Two types. We have the cylindrical type for the CFA piers, and we also see the square types. Those are for footings, and more rebar is waiting for that to happen. As I pan around this side back to the building, just want to draw your attention now to those wall panels that are being removed. So let's get in closer and let's take a good detailed view about what is going on. Now, as I mentioned, on Saturday they started taking off some of the weatherproof membrane to allow these panels to be removed. At the time of this filming, you can tell that three of the panels have been removed. By the time I left the site today, this entire section all the way down to the ground had been removed. You can also see on the second row of the wall panels, all of the lights have been removed. So that shows you this entire section is about to be removed. Now, another indicator that we're going to see a lot more of this section of the building removed is the work that's going on here on the roof section. The crews are working on another area of the weatherproof membrane where the wall and the roof joins together, and they're removing that so that they can remove the steel roof decking and then remove the rest of it so that you can see these openings like on the left-hand side of the screen. And here are the crews working to remove some of those strips of that weatherproof membrane. And it extends all the way, at least for this point, to this sort of junction section on the roof where you see that raised concrete berm, and also this kind of vertical column where two wall panels come together. But looking across that section, this gives you a really good view of how they're removing that weatherproof membrane. What is this looking like? And the reason why they are doing that is to allow for these wall panels to be removed. So right now it looks like at least 6 sections across and 8 wall panels high on this entire section is going to be removed. Here's a good view inside with those wall panels removed right now. And as I bring the drone down, you can see one of those wall panels on the ground. Also the footings that have been poured in concrete now, and all of the forms have been removed. You see those metal parts sticking up out of the footings. Those are the mounts for the columns, and then they'll be able to start constructing more of this structure. But very interesting to see that at least this portion of the south end of the building, all the walls are being removed. And also, for those wondering, since the wall panels were stained white, what's going to happen to them? I think they're going to reuse those on the extension itself. So I don't think that we're going to be losing out on the fact that they've already been stained. As I pull away, the CFA piers, drilling machines there, those cranes are still idle. They have not been put into use in the last couple of weeks, but I'll continue to monitor what they're doing. As we get closer to the wall here, where those workers are walking on that concrete section, some of that is for the footings, and also in that area where they were underneath the ground, where it's all been, the trenches have been filled back in, is where these white pipes that are sticking up out of the ground go underneath the perimeter grade beam and connect into other pipe systems already in existence in the factory. Now, as I pull away towards this southwest corner, I just want to give you a good overall view, closer end of how the south end grade appears today, and more of the work that they've been doing in this section. Also, where this trailer is, you can tell that many more of those pier rebar cages have been made and are stored here. This just gives you a good hint of how many more of those piers we should see being drilled in the near future. And as we continue to move our way towards that southwest angled corner of the building. This will give you a good view of this section that has had all the trenching filled back in, the pipe segments that are sticking out of the ground, and then how they proceed on that now filled in trench all the way over to just past that gray section where the temporary platform used to be, and then it goes in underneath the perimeter grade beam at that point in time and connects into the existing plumbing. So let's proceed over towards the temporary platform and take a look at some of the activity that is going on here today. And what we see is some equipment's being hoisted up onto the platform. It looks like a blue man lift was just delivered by that truck. There's some wooden crates on the ground that are some more production equipment that has been recently delivered. And then as we turn up onto the roof section, you can tell all of these enclosures. These are vent enclosures waiting for installation. We've already seen the crews cutting through the weatherproof membrane and installing the rectangular bases for these on a few of the southern portions of the roof as well. But as we continue to fly around in this circle and come back down along this side of the building, it gives you a good idea of how all of this portion looks today and some of that activity. I mentioned these wooden crates. This is just a closer in view of what they look like here, waiting for installation, or at least moving up onto that platform, and also some of those receiving doors. And here's some more receiving doors. There are some trucks here. That whole section in there is being reconfigured for production lines, one of which is for the Cybertruck. This kind of material staging on the left-hand side, it was filled with equipment and parts last week. Now almost all of that has been moved inside, and most of that equipment and parts goes through this door with that loading platform and then is assembled inside for those general assembly production lines. As we continue to fly to the north, I'll give you a view of the west main entrance. Again, not really any changes. They have not been doing any much work on these steel parts. The stainless steel cladding that we saw them test fitting still has not been installed. The end of line section here with those two white tents and that black ramp, I've seen a few cars coming out, but at the time of the video there wasn't a whole lot. But on the east side of the new car staging and transportation lot, there were a lot of Model Ys. I thought I would give you a close-in view here. It looks like several of the window segments have been removed onto this part of the building. Not exactly sure why, but usually when they do that, we see some sort of temporary platform installed. So I'm just monitoring that to find out what happens. As we continue to fly to the north along this side of the building, one of the interesting things is just the number of crates and pallets that come in and exit through that particular concrete ramp and door. And then also the white staining process has now reached and is wrapping around the northwest corner of the building. Many of the receiving doors and regular doors have that blue protective tape. We see tarps on the ground and then the plastic on the windows to protect from any of the stain and make sure it doesn't get any drips onto those surfaces or those windows. But this is a really good view of just how close to wrapping around the building they are now. It looks like there's just about 4 large and 1 small concrete section waiting for the stain. And also the crews are putting that tarp and the plastic window coverings now on this angled part of the building, which means that they're just going to continue the work going up towards the north end of the building. So as I turn back to give you a good look at the west side, this gives you a pretty good vantage point of just how much of this side of the building has had that white stain applied. There's a great overall view from the north looking to the south of the main factory, the parking lot on the north end, and all the activity on the north end of the factory. But we're going to start today on this east side where a large overflow lot has been created for all of these rack mounts and castings. And I believe that almost all of these are certainly Model Y castings for now. Many of the rack systems have markings on there that they say they're part of the Model Ys. But as we've discussed in the past, as the production of the Cybertruck nears and the number of castings that are going to be made to support the Cybertruck, they're going to have to come up with a better system to manage both the Cybertruck and the Model Y castings. And I think what we're seeing here is part of that process to reconfigure this area to be able to support the two product lines. And the number of rack mounts here and the fact that they are relocating them to this side of the factory just gives you an idea of just how much space they're going to need to be able to manage that. I think this is also a very good sign when we think about how close production for the Cybertruck is becoming and the fact that they're making all of these changes. Speaking of changes, here's more work on the trench work on the widened berm here. And a lot of the conduit and the concrete vaults have been in place. This is a great vantage point. Also, looking into those receiving doors, you can see forms, and they are now starting to pour concrete in that entire ground slab, which they've reconfigured over the last couple of months. Here's another good view of the work on the trenching for the conduit. They're continuing to finish this section here with these two vaults. This is a very large junction. And what we're seeing on the left-hand side where the worker is sort of standing on that concrete, that is the encased concrete electrical conduit that goes underneath the wall or the perimeter grade beam and will allow the solar panels on the roof to connect to the megapack. And then the rest of that is to connect power to the main factory and up to the new switch yard. The work on the left for the fire water loop trenching continues. We see an interesting development here. These items that you see next to these crates, I'll try to give you a closer view. These are items that are used to recycle a lot of the plastic parts, the pellets that are used to make the plastic bumpers and dashboards and so forth. And I actually covered those in a previous video, but it's just a way of being able to recycle that material in a much faster and efficient way. So now let's get ready to cross over Tesla Road and take a look at the Megapack site and some of the changes up here today. On the left of the screen, you can see about half of the concrete pads now have been moved up and placed on the Megapack main site. One of the materials that are being stored here in this marshalling yard. Some of the work on the right-hand side of the screen with those vaults, and that's where the conduit extends all the way to the building, and then up here towards these two sites. And then this is a good view of how those concrete pads have been placed on the left-hand side and getting ready to be placed on the right-hand side. Also, new trenching here on the left. Looks like some smaller conduit is being installed on this section, while on this area in the middle, more of the gravel mix is being spread, and this is where the actual megapacks themselves will be installed at some point in the near future. Here, the steel assembly continues. This is in and around those cable trays on the ground, and this is really starting to shape up and then gives us an idea what that final form is going to appear like when it is completed. There's still quite a bit more of the steel assembly that will be required, but we do see 4 of those steel poles have now been installed on the 4 corners. And I think that generally outlines what the installed steel parts will look like. But here's a good overall vantage point of the site looking back towards the building and how it is continuing to transform. On the left-hand side, more earthwork. They're widening this section all the way over towards where that electrical switch yard is located. And it looks like they're also doing some trench work on that middle section of the screen right now. And then you can see those 2 concrete vaults with the manhole covers nearby. As we fly up over the power lines, I'll position the drone so you can get a good view of how the entire Megapack site looks today. And then as I come down over the crane, this is where you can see the conduit stopping right now next to those yellow forms. The crane is getting ready to move some of those yellow forms into that pit. how the pit itself looks with all of the rebar in place. The ground slab has been poured. The retaining wall is still doing its job. And then as we come down lower, this gives you a good view of all the rebar remaining to be installed. The yellow wall panels that are being installed, these are forms to allow the concrete to be poured, and also gives you a pretty good idea based on the worker and those ladders how tall that is. I'd say we're probably looking at about 10 to 12 feet, which is probably about 3.5 meters tall. As I pull away, this gives you a good view of the workshop site here, how the entire underground vault system that they're building looks, and that, again, that retaining wall. And as I pull away some more, this gives you a good view of where that is located in relation to the main electrical switch yard. And speaking of the switch yard itself, it looks like almost all of it is now completed. Everything from the cable trays to the gravel to the steel parts and the high tension wires, and also the control room and even the gates into the fence. So a lot of great progress here. The steel pipe our pole that has been cut up still is remaining to be removed, but it gives you an idea of how this entire section appears today and the overall construction site. So let's go over to the die shop and battery cathode plant and take a look at the activity over there today. As we fly over the Martin Marietta batch plant, we can see a lot of progress here near the die shop. One thing that you can see is the asphalt temporary roads that were paved during the weekend, and this will just be here during the construction process, and then the final ones will be installed later on. As I zoom in, you can tell the concrete apron is almost ready for the concrete now, and the rail system in the middle of that concrete apron is for a gantry crane rail, and those continue inside, and then inside this section is where those deep foundations for some pretty large equipment is going to be installed. And I think those bridge crane rails are to help with moving some of that heavy equipment inside, and also to remove it for transportation off-site. This entire west side continues to be a hive of activity with the materials, some trenching, and also more of the berm removal on the left. And this viewpoint gives you a really good idea of just how thin it is between this site and that Martin Marietta batch plant. One of the things that I did notice on the north end of the battery cathode plant was the window installation is really making a lot of progress. So I thought I'd bring the drone in close and give you a good view of how it looks today. The east and north sides have almost all of the glass panels now installed, and they're getting ready to work on the west side of the building. And this gives a really good view of how this looks. And I think this is probably going to be some sort of offices, and I think a view out of this part of the building will be really nice. Now on the bottom you can see 5 of those large receiving docks, a larger receiving door on the left, and then some other personnel doors on the right, and some more of the glass panels waiting for installation. And this is a good viewpoint of how the east side with the glass looks today. As I pull back slightly to the northeast, this gives you a really good vantage point of the battery cathode plant, the die shop, the main factory, and the cell test lab here on the left. Now, one of the interesting developments here on the self-test lab is that part of the roof decking has been removed in this northwest corner, and it looks like they are doing some additional construction, maybe some additions to the roof structure here, and there's a good view down inside. Looks like some piping and some electrical conduit in that particular area of the building. So another thing I'll be monitoring. And speaking of new construction, here on the east side, on the ground section, we can see graded areas underway. We can see this, what looks like a large excavation trench being prepared. In this middle section, it looks like kind of a zigzag trench is being dug out right now by that small excavator. You can see the worker nearby. It looks like it's tracing out sort of a foundation kind of look right now. So maybe that's the north end of whatever structure they're going to build. And then these 2 parallel trenches have quite a bit of rebar installed, and it looks like that may continue to the north end where that zigzag trenching that we talked about is located. And then here on the south end, we see a deep foundation getting rebar. It has the basic concrete floor installed, and then they're going to be putting some forms. Those are those gray items that you see nearby there to prepare for concrete. So very interesting. It does look like it's going to be a new structure here on the east side. And this vantage point gives you a really good view of how this all looks and how it is all coming together. So while we're here, I'm going to fly over this construction site and the roof, and I want to show you some additional changes that are going on the west side at the chiller plant that will support the battery cathode plant itself. Also, as we fly around, you can see more of that asphalt temporary roadway that was installed on the weekend. Now here we see some of this pipe being installed in these trenches and also those concrete manhole covers. There's a recent update to the site plan that talks about the treated water going through this section, and then there'll be a lift station on the north end. And I'll give you some more information about that a little later. The chiller plant itself looks like there's still a lot of activity, much more of the installation of pipes and other equipment on that roof section. You can see that covered area between the vaporizers and that chiller plant. And then now a very large new section of formed and rebarred area for another ground slab. And what its purpose is, I'm not really sure, but it'll be interesting to continue to monitor that. We can see more of the trenching down the middle here of the alleyway, and then on the right-hand side, some of those temporary portable air conditioning units with those large hoses. And then the crane itself has been moved away from where they did the asphalt paving, but otherwise it's still sitting idle. There's another large section of clearing, and we'll get a close look at that a little later in the video, but I wanted to just turn back and give you a good overall view of how that complex of die shop and the battery cathode plant looks today. Now as we pull away over this kind of rounded top workshop with the trailers nearby, this is a good view of the materials that are being stored here just north of the East Warehouse on Wheels. And it does look like more and more materials are being stockpiled here. These blue and white items are part of the TKS painting system that we've seen have a lot of parts delivered, and many of them moved inside the factory for assembly. And it looks like there's still some large items of the TKS system to be installed. As I mentioned, this new clearing is continuing to be prepared. It looks like it's going to eventually connect over to where this old house is, and we see the treemover.com crews preparing to move yet another large tree. And you can tell by the size of this tree, it's a very old tree, and it looks like Tesla has decided that they want to relocate it to somewhere else on the site rather than just losing it. And this is the third of these large trees that have been relocated by this company. And as I mentioned, I've covered them before, but you can tell their website on the screen. I would recommend you take a look at that to see their revolutionary and patented process of moving the trees. But as I fly around this way and get in a little bit closer, you can kind of see the basic idea is they surround the tree, they excavate underneath it, they put these poles to support the tree, and then they use those kind of inflated bags to support the tree, and then it allows it to be moved. Very novel process. And then the final thing I wanted to show you here is, looks like there's a lot of trucks that are being queued up. Maybe it's a little bit of delay entering the factory, but also just the number of trucks that are arriving today is pretty cool. So I'm going to fly up at a higher altitude and return back up to the northeast to kind of reveal most of the entire site and many of the places that we covered today. I hope that you enjoyed the discussion and some of the interesting milestones, particularly the south end removal of the wall panels. And again, take a look at my 3 January video for more information on that. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day.